Hello, all. Thank you for taking the time this week to view week's 3 Roundup discussion on vernacular landscape in the rural built environment. In week 3, we had asked students to provide examples of vernacular landscapes and places lived or visited holding special meanings to them. As we delved into the meaning of vernacular and cultural landscape, the unself-conscious process of building, and the timeless way of building. To start off, we would like to talk about an example provided by one of our community TAs. In his example, a place that holds a special meaning to him, a hotel in the wilderness situated in the state of Montana. He presented the development of the hotel as a cultural landscape as opposed to a vernacular landscape. He explains the hotel was constructed by the railway company as a resort destination for railroad customers traveling between the East Coast and the Midwest of the United States. He states, "This is a cultural landscape because this intervention into a pristine landscape represented a time in American history, which he states was in 1915, when its citizens wanted to explore the countryside, but automobile mobility was not yet commonly available. The railway company made it possible for many people to see and experience this beautiful place. They were also interested in the Native American people and the way they lived, and which they also considered this place sacred." I guess first off, we can all agree that this is a cultural landscape. If we refer back to our definition, landscape made by humans. But also, what can we say about it being a vernacular landscape based on the description that he's provided? Examples?
I think we can definitely agree that it's a cultural landscape, right? And if we go back to a cultural landscape refers to a landscape made by humans. So we can say that about this. In fact, you can make that argument for almost any particular built environment that it's a landscape made by humans in some way. Whether it's a vernacular landscape or not, I think that depends on a more specific definition that we'd have to go to. So what does it mean to be vernacular? Is it something that's built by the common people? Can it also be built by a corporation or by a company? If we steer this back to Asia, looking at the example of Shop House in Penang and in Malacca, those were also built by developers and built by large corporations, but we consider them as a vernacular landscape, right? Part of the vernacular setting made by humans. So I think if we look at that, we can't simply point to this hotel in Montana and say that because it was built by a large corporation that it's not vernacular. I think we can still look at other components of the piece of architecture. That being said, personally, I don't think we have enough information about this to make a determination, but I think we can't exclude it from being a vernacular landscape.
Okay. All right, let's move on to another example. Another learner, Laura Lee M., provided an example what she considered part of the vernacular landscape in Hilo, Hawaii. She described how large-scale sugarcane production during the 20th century developed clusters of small plantation houses throughout the fields, which many of them still exist today. The houses were constructed to take advantage of the climate and weather with fully opened windows allowing wind to pass through. The unique feature would be the outdoor bathroom, which was built as an extension of the house. The common practice was for the homeowners to clean and change out their clothes after full days of work, therefore avoiding dirtying the house. I have to agree that this is a unique feature developed from how workers adapted to their daily routines. Different countries we also see have different arrangements for this, right? In suburban America, we have something called the mud room, which is a secondary entrance that segregates the outdoor space and the cleaner indoor living space. And in traditional and modern Japanese homes, we have something called the genka, which essentially is a level difference between the inside and the outside, but it's inside the main door. And it's made of different materials, so it's easier to clean or mop. So this is where people take off their outdoor shoes and then they put on their indoor shoes. This also applies to many restaurants that is found in Japan. Nowadays, we don't necessarily need them, but these persist because it's synonymous with good practice, resulting in defining a unique sense of place. I guess would there be other examples where we can describe with the students?
This would, I think this would brought me back to the cases that were mentioned in the video, like Dr. Imo talked about the houses that his grandfather's houses in Bangladesh. So at the very first time that there was a house built there, and later when the family expand, they enclose the house to form a courtyard so that people can stay there, chit chat, or spending time there. So I think referring back to the vernacular, this is a process of like if you need it, then you just build it. It's related to what we talked about, the self-conscious building process. So it's a process to build a house that for people to live in, right? So it's a process, I would say.
I think something to add on to that is with the example of the sugarcane plantation in Hawaii, this may or may not have been built by another large corporation, right? It could be built by a conglomerate. And then when we talk about the example of Yuman with his grandfather's home and the cluster that they build, and then they branch out another cluster, so that's built by a family, right? But again, do we need to separate that one is built by a large corporation and may have a very top-down type of planning, and the other is built by a family? As more families come in, and you pop up and you see clustering this way. So do we need to separate these two, and do we need to make a distinction between one that is maybe organized by a company and one that is more grassroots, or can we say that these come from the same ideology and from the same place?
I think this is the same ideology. I think this act can see as like a symbolic act of cultural norm. I think in different places they have different practice for how they experience their living environments, or they have a different kind of method to do with like how they build their living room. But I think it can treat us like a vernacular ways to do it.
And you could make the case maybe even that a conglomerate is just like a big family.
Yep.
Of course, their idea is making profit, whereas a family is just continuing the family line, but maybe the motive aside, their goal is the same, to expand and to be successful.
It very depends on the cultures and social background, I think.
I think something that you guys all three of you touched upon is kind of the time concept, right? It's building over time. So the meaning of it can kind of change, and then that's how we pick up or how we read it as time goes on.
It'd be good to see in this example that Laura Lee brought up, if this clustering of plantation houses happen over a short period of time, in a very once it goes kind of thing, or if it's over the course of several years or a decade or many decades, where the clusters pop up depending on where the sugarcane production is happening most. Or I think that would be good if we could find out a little bit more about that one.
Yeah. Okay. And finally, this is from learner Ocho Puntos. Posed the question, is there a choice? Many of the vernacular houses and settlements might be a result of an economic condition of a particular time and place. With this in mind, would certain vernacular places be built differently if the people had a choice? For example, is the use of mud or wood based solely on economic factors in certain vernacular architecture?
I think economic issues will definitely contribute to part of how it shapes our built environment. But again, going back to our go-to example, the shop houses in Southeast Asia, they are primarily designed and built as shop houses to sell things, are very economically driven, but at the same time, because of their inhabitants' involvement in shaping and the add-on and like the different stuff that goes inside the shops, that makes the entire landscape to be read as a whole, and that in turn becomes very vernacular. So I think the choice, there's definitely a choice factor as well, which also, as we discussed in this week's video, in Hong Kong we have the pencil development, which is also maybe to a lot of people an unwilling choice to be living in such a small shoebox-sized apartment. But at the same time, it constitutes as our Hong Kong particular type of vernacular because of our current situation, socio-economically speaking. Yeah.
Is there a choice, do you think? In Hong Kong, is there a choice?
Yes.
Yes.
If you have
mean,
money,
If you have money, you
If
have a choice.
you have a choice of, I mean, I think Hong Kong is a very interesting case because of how quickly Hong Kong has developed, right? Economically, socially. The biggest thing being is that in such a short span, we've seen the price of real estate go up so quickly, where maybe a generation ago, our parents would be able to come out, maybe work hard, earn that money, and afford to own the first house. But nowadays, people do and don't have a choice. If they don't have the money, they live with their parents. Maybe that's the choice, as opposed to they have a bit more than they can, purchase their first, you say matchbox house.
Great.
Yep. So hopefully we've answered tried our best to answer some of your questions for this week. Be sure to know that we really appreciate your responses and comments. So if you haven't been able to run through the discussions question for this week, please do so. We will continue to answer some of them. So as you guys have more questions for even our discussion this week, please post them to week 3's discussion, and we will be glad to answer them. So see you all next week as we will move on to the next topic of the vernacular, or the urban vernacular. Thank you and goodbye.